Hello, Brovs. We're back with Anyone's Son, a true story by Roberta Roche with Harry de la Roche Jr. Chapter 11, The Trial. Hopefully this is not a long section because I don't really feel like reading. But I'm doing it because I have to finish this. I don't have to finish it, but it kind of looks pretty long. It's very disappointing if it's as long as it looks. Are you kidding me? You can tell me that this is like 10 pages long? 15, 20 pages long? Yeah, it's literally 21 pages long. All right, I guess I'll read 10 pages. I'll have this. Half this. 34. The trial started with the state asking for a conviction on 4 charges of first-degree murder and the defense seeking a verdict of not guilty on 3 counts and not guilty because of temporary insanity on 1 count. It opened in Bergen County Courthouse in Judge James Toscano's courtroom, since the room was larger than Judge Madden's. Just before the trial began, John Taylor was called to Judge Madden's chambers, where he met with the judge and prosecutor and was told that the prosecution was willing to make a plea bargain offer in which I could bargain to accept a lesser charge and a lesser sentence than if I stood trial and was found guilty. In this instance, the prosecution was ready to offer me a non-volt contendere on my father, which means no defense, and a guilty of second-degree murder on Eric. Then the state would drop the other 2 charges and give me a joint sentencing of 30 years to life. Under that sentencing, I would have been eligible for parole in 10 years, really 9, since I'd done a year in jail. After John talked with the judge and prosecutor, he spoke to the Greers and Bob Kleinberg and told them about the suggestion. He stressed it must be my decision, though, and then they all came to a holding cell, and I was brought to them. When John explained to me what was up, I immediately told him, no way, I wanted to go to trial, and I wanted no part of a bargain. Why don't you think it over, he suggested. Take a little time. There he is. Look at that cartoon nose on Mr. Taylor. Oh, that's Salkin right there, I think. No, I answered emphatically. If I walk away free from the trial, fine. But if I go to prison, I expect to get killed in some way, so I wouldn't live the 10 years. With the decision, the trial began at 1:55 p.m. when Judge Madden entered the courtroom and announced that this was the case of the state of New Jersey versus Harry W. de la Roche Jr., docket number 2657-76. The jury, which we later learned was sequestered at the Hasbrook House in Hasbrook Heights, was taken to and from court each day in a heavily guarded bus. The jurors were always accompanied by at least 2 sheriff's officers, and it cost the county $1,000 a day to sequester them for the trial. The courtroom was a windowless, wood-paneled chamber on the 4th floor of the building. Bright lights shone from the ceiling, and the American flag stood in the corner. The first 2 rows in the spectators' gallery were reserved for the press and courtroom artists. The spectators sat behind the press, and during the days of the trial, those seats were usually occupied by Aunt Arden and Uncle John, Roy Nilsson, who came up from Maryland, Pastor Immendorf, and Ruth Mooring, Uncle Steve Madriperla's family friends, family friends and acquaintances, parishioners from my church, high school and college students, and clerks, lawyers, and secretaries from the county courthouse. Jeff Fritz and his family came one day, and Bob Gant and his family came another. Tink Thompson came whenever she could, and some days when I looked at the spectators, I saw Jack Looney, a friend of my father, whom I hadn't seen in years. Martha Terhune was court reporter for the opening day, but she took turns on other days with three other court reporters, Stephen Lithauer, Regina Dennehy, and Holly Scholes. John and I sat at the council table to the left of the spectators' gallery. Richard Salkin sat on the right with Anthony Sorello, his investigator. The witness stand was to the right, between the judge and the jury. The court clerk sat at Judge Madden's right, along with two young law clerks who acted as secretaries. Henry Vanderwerf from the sheriff's office was my security guard, and other court officers and security guards were at the door and along the walls. The first day's proceedings got underway with the prosecutor's opening statement. After reading the grand jury indictment for 4 counts of felonious, malicious, willful murder, Richard Salkin portrayed me as a cunning and methodical killer who was trying to frame my brother. He compared an opening statement to the contents of a book and told the jury they'd see in part 1 the ugliness and horror of the crime. Detective Leroy Smith leaving Hackensack Court with Detective Sergeant Paul Likas. But then there's part 2, he stated as he walked back and forth in front of the jurors and sat on the council table. That's when the games began. That's when Harry told police that his family was dead, but he didn't know where Ronald was. That's where he was coming from then, trying to frame Ronald. Mr. Salkin ended his opening by admonishing the jury members that neither he nor they would have a pleasant job, but he warned them that they had a duty to use common sense in judging the facts. Montvale Police Captain John Hanna and Sergeant Carl Olson leave courthouse in Hackensack after testifying at De La Roche murder trial. No one is looking for a lynch mob, he declared, but we're not looking for 16 Pollyannas either. When John Taylor stood up, he told the jurors that a grand jury indictment is one-sided on the other side of the state and that no defense is offered them. But in this trial, he said, there is a defense, and it will be presented at the proper time. He went on to remind the jurors that the prosecution must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt and that the burden of proof is on the state. We welcome the state's scientific evidence, he declared. Later, we would find it wasn't all that scientific. In closing, John asked the jury not to form hasty judgments. As he moved to the back of my chair and put his hand on my shoulder, as Harry sits here at my side, he's presumed to be innocent, he stressed. He's not a criminal. He's like you and I. His future will be in your hands. Sergeant Carl Olson was sworn in as a witness that first afternoon. Both he and Mike O'Donovan had been promoted to sergeants sometime before the trial, and when he was questioned by Mr. Salkin, he told his version of flagging me down for going through a stop sign, but I still insist that I stopped him by coming up behind him. At one point in his testimony, Olson recalled that when he told me to empty my pockets, I had a plastic bag. John objected to the mention of this, so the judge sent the jury out of the room. Then John presented an argument that the prosecution was trying to link me to the possession of marijuana when I was never charged with that. Judge Madden sustained John's objection and ruled that Olson's possible remarks about possessing marijuana would be prejudicial to the defense. I started making notations during the first day of the trial, and as I continued this during the trial, I was often criticized for the way I took notes on my pad as though I were a lawyer, but I wanted to help in my own defense, and there were many things to note, including inaccuracies in the prosecution's testimonies. At the end of that Thursday session, John Madden cautioned the jurors, as he did every day, that during the evening's recess they were not to read newspapers and magazines or listen to radio or television programs that commented on the trial. He also said they were not to discuss the case among themselves or with anyone else during their evenings. Much of the testimony on Friday was without the jury's presence, while Judge Madden listened to arguments on whether or not to allow my first statement to the Montvale police to be admitted into court and read in front of the jury. During the morning proceedings, Captain Hanna testified that after he took me to police headquarters at 6:30 a.m., he personally dialed the Greer's telephone number at 6:45 a.m. and allowed me to talk with him. As Mr. Sulkin questioned him, he talked about the phone call and said the Greers had come to the station and seen me right away. In John's cross-examination about making the telephone call, he gave this testimony. Question: at what time was this officer that he made this call? Answer: to the best of my knowledge, within 10 minutes after arriving. Question: so somewhere around 6:45. Answer: yeah, I would say so. Question: do you know who he spoke to on the phone? Answer: it was either Mr. or Mrs. Greer. I don't know who it was. Question: and how long did it take them to get to the police headquarters after Harry had contacted them? Answer: I think it was about 20 to 30 minutes. Question: so about somewhere between 7 and quarter after, you say they arrived? Answer: right. Question: and when they arrived at the headquarters, where were you? Answer: in my office. Question: was Harry still there with you? Answer: yes. Question: and did you escort them into your office at police headquarters? Answer: I don't recall whether it was an escort or whether I just invited them in. I don't recall. Question: and you're telling me now that Mr. and Mrs. Greer came into headquarters, met you, and you brought them into Harry. Is that right? Answer: right. Question: no doubt in your mind about that, officer? Answer: no. Question: did you excuse yourself from the room so they could talk privately? Answer: no. Question: how long did they talk with him? Answer: well, I think Mrs. Greer spoke the longest with him as far as time goes. I don't recall. Question: and you're telling me that this is all around 7 o'clock to 7:15 in the morning? Answer: if memory serves me right, yes. Question: and what happened after they spoke with Harry at 7:15? Answer: there was a period of time where they left my office. I don't recall now whether Harry had to go to the men's room or whether they just wanted to talk outside or whatever. There was no restricting his movements or their movements. Later in the day, the Greers took the stand and told a conflicting story outside of the presence of the jury. But both insisted I hadn't called till somewhere around 10:30 a.m., after which my aunt called right back to verify the call from the station. At a later date, she produced her phone bill showing a call to Montvale on November 28. The time was 10:53. John Taylor subpoenaed the Montvale police records to obtain their bill for that day, and the record showed no call to Maywood till the Greers received their first call from the station at 10:47 a.m. The second call at 5:42 p.m. was to tell them to come back for the arraignment. Both Greers went on to say on the stand that the cops refused their repeated requests to see or talk to me until after I was arraigned, November 28. They also said Captain Hanna had told them I didn't need a lawyer. When I heard the captain testify that they had been free to talk to me from the moment they arrived, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I almost went out of my chair, yet the prosecution shoved this lie under oath under the table and ignored it. When Sergeant Michael O'Donovan took the stand, he talked about his search of the house and conversations with me before he made the statement in examination by Mr. Sulkin. I then patted down and checked Harry out. O'Donovan said he had done this because he had seen a bulge in my pocket and wanted to establish it wasn't a weapon. John picked up on this patting down and emphasized his contention that the way I was patted down indicated that the suspicion had shifted toward me, and that because of this, the first statement I gave the police should not be admissible to court because the police improperly failed to read me my constitutional rights to keep silent and to have an attorney present. He pointed out that from 4 a.m. I was isolated from anyone but the police, and that during that time they took my car keys, had me empty my pockets, patted me down, interrogated me, and worked on me as though I were a suspect while I had my free movements restricted. I'm trying to point out to the court that at this particular time, Harry de la Roche was in fact the suspect, was in fact technically arrested, he stressed. In his cross-examination, he asked O'Donovan about when I got my rights. Question: did you at any time advise him that he didn't have to talk to you? Answer: yes, I did. Question: when did you do that? Answer: when he became a suspect in this case. Question: at what time of day was that? Answer: the latter part of the afternoon. Question: not in the morning? Answer: no, sir. The state and the witnesses for the state continued to emphasize that I wasn't a suspect in the morning and that I wasn't in custody then. Yet in a December 10th, 1976 interview with writer-sociologist Barry Wood, which was turned over to the defense, O'Donovan discussed bringing me to the police station. Is Harry still a witness who is reporting the crime to you, or is Harry now a suspect? He speculated. This is a matter of judicial interpretation. Our focus now did start coming in on Harry. Since there was no forced entry, no robbery, no sexual struggle or evidence, the bodies were only dead a very short period of time, still warm and bleeding with normal finger movement. No discoloration upon the bodies. It therefore occurred within a half hour of our arrival. After Ronnie is found, the investigation takes on an entirely new light, he added. Every member of the family is accounted for dead, so now Harry becomes the suspect. Now the questioning of Harry is no longer inquisitive, but starts to become accusatory. What is INV? Investigator. Jesus. Investigator Frank Delapre also contradicted previous testimony when he testified that at 8 a.m. on November 28th, he told the desk officer, "Oh, voyage," at the Montvale headquarters to notify the Greers about the murders. This conflicted with Captain Hannah's sworn testimony that I had called the Greers at 7:15, and that after they arrived somewhere between 7 and a quarter after, they had been permitted to see me. Delpreet also testified that the police began considering me a suspect about 12:30 p.m. when Ronnie was found. Yet, O'Donovan had said a short while before that I became a suspect the latter part of the afternoon. I know I handed out bullshit myself, but sometimes I had to shake my head at some of the things at the trial. In fact, someone said the tragedy of murder became a comedy of errors. Despite the arguments about my Montvale statement, Judge Madden ruled that I'd given it voluntarily and that it could be used against me. After saying the Miranda warnings do not have to be given while soliciting information, he announced O'Donovan could read the first 60 pages of the statement to the jury. This was the portion the police took before Ronnie's body was discovered. The judge ruled against reading the last 4 pages discovered. The judge ruled against reading the last 4 pages taken after police discovered Ronnie, because I had become the prime suspect and should have been advised of my rights. The next day, we had a Saturday session, and beginning on that day, Bob Kleinberg sat at the counsel table for the rest of the trial. One of the first things I heard that morning when I got to court was the news that Kleinberg and Taylor's office had been vandalized during the night. Cinder blocks were thrown at the windows, and 2 of the large ones were broken. Then catsup was spilled on the building to resemble splattered blood. Is it ketchup when it's spelled catsup? Was also on the white front door. The damage ran to $500, and since it followed the Friday proceedings, John believed it resulted from his being in the case. No witnesses or suspects were found in the area, but a large footprint was discovered. Maybe that's where Bigfoot was. So it goes to 248. Yeah, we'll stop here. That's halfway through. And there goes my heat. And there goes that portion of the chapter. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.